Welcome to Transmission, the podcast that uncovers the business of clean energy. I am Alejandro de Diego, market analyst at Motor Energy. At the recent Reuters Energy Live conference, where this episode was recorded, one question was on everyone's lips. How do we power all of these new data centers? The energy industry is going through a strange moment. The transition to clean power is accelerating, but the grid is also being asked to do something new. It's being asked to power a second economy, the AI boom. But data centers are not normal customers. They need a lot of power now, with no interruptions and no excuses. That demand is colliding with a basic reality. That reality is new infrastructure is slow. Transformers take time. Transmission takes longer. Interconnection queues are backed up everywhere. As a result, the question has started to shift. Instead of what's the cleanest system in 2040, we're increasingly asking what keeps data centers running in 2026. That's where today's episode begins, with that tension between climate ambition and the need for reliability, between long-term decarbonization and short-term capacity. Our guest is Peter Sawicki from Mitsubishi Power Americas. He sells and builds large power equipment, gas turbines, combined cycle plants, basically grid-scale hardware meant to run for decades. And that's why this conversation is interesting, because it forces a hard and comfortable question. When demand increases faster than clean supply can be built, what fills the gap? Gas is an obvious answer, but it's also a risky one. Yes, it's flexible. Yes, it's also proven, but it's still fossil fuel. And every temporary bridge has a habit of becoming permanent. Peter doesn't dodge that. He knows that gas alone is not the ideal answer. It's a shock absorber, something that buys time while the grid expands and storage scales. A pragmatic response to a timing problem. And he argues that even in the near term, the real story is hybrid systems. Gas for steady power, batteries for instant response. Because AI loads don't behave like factories. The reliability standards are brutal. This logic is already reshaping the map. Not just where data centers get built, but how they get built. On-site power. Private mini-grids that bypass the waiting list. So this episode isn't about loving or hating gas. It's about confronting the timeline. What happens when the world electrifies? When AI demand surges? And when the clean system we want isn't being built fast enough to meet the needs of the system we have. Welcome back to Transmission. Peter, thank you very much for joining us today. Can you start by telling us about yourself, what you do at Mitsubishi, and what does Mitsubishi actually do?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Happy to be on the podcast. I've been with Mitsubishi now 11 years, always been in the power industry. So I've got about 30 years of experience in this industry. I live in San Diego. I've got a family of 5, 3 young ones. One just started university this year, so very excited about that. So yeah, I can't think of a more exciting time to be in the industry than right now. It's really booming with all the activity going on. Yeah. So thanks again for having me.
Of course. If you could simply describe what Mitsubishi does within the energy industry, what services or products it provides.
So I work for a division of MHI, which is Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, called Mitsubishi Power. Primarily, we are gas turbine manufacturers at our heart. We also have some other technologies, but primarily most of the business is around large-scale gas turbines. So our manufacturing is in Japan, but we also do manufacturing in Savannah, Georgia as well. We have the big assembly facility in Savannah. And in Orlando, we actually do some blade and vane work for gas turbine components as well.
Okay, great. And what type of daily tasks do you have in your role for the audience to understand?
Right. So I started out in the industry on the sales side of the business. So I'm still very much on the sales side with Mitsubishi Power. Within the last year, I took a role in a group called Emerging Technologies. So I'm leading this group called Emerging Technologies. So it's very business development focused. What we're doing is focusing on our non-conventional customers, which we call them non-conventional, but it's basically non-utility or non-power development customers. So we're looking at talking a lot of the hyperscalers, talking to all the co-locators, and just really small scale powered land developers in the AI space. So most of my activity is really day-to-day conversations around just the big boom around data center build out, trying to understand that market.
And can you tell us a bit more about the boom that you're living with the data center development so that everyone in the audience understands it? Where is that demand coming from, and which regions, what type of customers usually?
Right, I will say it's unprecedented. So this has been kind of not a boring space. I mean, energy geeks, we always consider our space pretty exciting. But, now over the last few years, we're seeing just an unprecedented demand that we've really never seen, this energy growth that we're experiencing right now. And a lot of that is being driven by the data center growth in the United States. I think almost 50% of it. We are seeing a lot of domestic onshoring as well with this new administration. So that's only compounding to the growth we're seeing. So the challenge is really trying to keep up with the demand we're seeing from some of our key customers at this time.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. You have been talking about how the energy industry and power operators can manage all of the data center requests as large loads interconnections. Was there a moment when you clearly saw the gap between what the grid can deliver and what these new loads require?
Yeah, that happened probably early last year when I took this role. I mean, even before probably I took the role, I expressed an interest in just jumping into this sector just because we needed to know so much about this, what's happening. Because frankly speaking, a couple of years ago, we didn't have this on our horizon. We weren't planning for this major boom in AI and expecting this massive load growth. So it kind of surprised the industry in general. But I would say probably summer of last year, we really were in the middle of it. We were seeing orders rising with some of the utility customers we have. And that's really when the kind of lights went off that we were going to see kind of a unprecedented demand. And then, every month I would say the story has been evolving. I'm sure the story, if you interviewed me in a couple of months from now, there will be a completely different story. But so far, it feels like you almost have to pinch yourself because you think that this market cannot last long. But the fact is, the hyperscalers and the co-locators are really putting the money where their mouth is and spending on these resources. So we're seeing a tremendous build out. And from some of our key customers, we are a manufacturer for large gas turbines primarily. So we really see that market as being kind of the core utility customers in the market. And so those customers, utility customers, are really building as fast as they can to meet that demand. So we're really in a really great spot right now in the industry. We do have some smaller technology. We can talk about that maybe a little bit later, how we're seeing this kind of behind the meter start building out. But right now, the focus of the company is really trying to meet the massive demand for grid connected clean power.
I see. If you could tell the audience what it's like from the supplier side, what has it been to adapt to this surge in demand? What measures have you taken? What effects has it created within the organization? How have you adapted to this massive demand?
Yeah, so it's easy to say that you can increase capacity pretty dramatically, but you also have to execute on that technology. And so at Mitsubishi Power, we have gas turbine technology. As we approach the market, we're very pragmatic about doing things. So what that means for us is really trying to figure out how we can not only scale up the factories that we have, right? But also as we execute these projects to execute them with excellence.
Yeah, and so that people understand the actual scale of the product that you're selling, can you walk us through in simple terms how the whole process looks like? For example, a utility reaches out to you, they need a new turbine. How long does it take? So till the moment they receive that turbine, what different steps do you have to follow for quality assurance, for manufacturing it, and for sending it over?
Right.
Is a very complex process, right?
Right, that is certainly. Yeah, typically the schedule would be like, from a development point of view, if a utility comes to us and wants to order a turbine, it would be a couple of year delivery. That's extended out now further than that. So we're looking at several years for deliveries of these turbines. And then after delivery of the turbine, you still have another couple of years of installation of the turbine, commissioning of the power plant to really get those electrons. So right now you're pushing out, like I mentioned, several years before you can actually see those electrons on the grid, which is creating a huge challenge for the industry. As you know, many of these data centers, they want power now. They're all talking about, 2026 delivery for power, 2027 delivery for power. And that's the huge challenge in the industry now, is how we can continue to try to support them with the build out of this massive demand that we're seeing in the industry.
And you have hit a point that I wanted to ask now. You have been saying data centers, what they value most is speed to interconnection, speed to power, actually.
Correct.
And this leads to multiple solutions, connecting to the grid,
Right.
going through the interconnection queue, or bringing generation on site.
Yeah.
We have seen that Mitsubishi has been proposing turbine plus battery setups for hyperscalers on data centers. What exactly is that? Where is the setup offering that others don't?
Yeah, it's still very much at our core. We're equipment manufacturers. And I mentioned the large-scale gas turbine that we manufacture. This is, in a combined cycle application, that's almost 700 megawatt, or over 700 megawatts of power production. If you think about a mid-sized utility, you're talking about, 3,000 megawatts of capacity. So we're talking about, units that are not easily delivered behind the meter. Those are more geared towards our smaller aeroderivative gas turbines. So we do have a division that manufactures our small aeroderivative gas turbines. These are normally like 30 megawatt gas turbines. So where these make a lot of sense is the bring your own power concept. We can trailer mount these units. They can move them out to the site very quickly, and then we can install them within weeks on the site. You mentioned the offerings that we're trying to build upon now is really trying to pair that up with different technologies that we have in-house or as associated companies. So as you bring your own power to a data center, it's a really complicated solution because many of these data centers require extremely high reliability. They talk 5 nines, which is, to try to think about that from a mechanical point of view, it's not easy to achieve, right? So you need to back up quite a bit. So that's where really installing more and more capacity makes sense. So you have to actually provide overcapacity. And that's what you can do very easily with these small power plants where you have small gas turbines. And then when you pair the battery with it, you're able to take some of the transients that we see. Some of these large language learning models, they have transients in milliseconds that the gas turbine in itself will not be able to respond to, right? So you need some sort of buffer in between the data center and the gas turbine itself. So we are seeing a lot of battery installations come between that than just the specific equipment components.
I see. And just to put a simple example, let's say that a new customer comes in, a hyperscaler, 100 megawatt data center. What would a simple setup look like in terms of those small gas turbines plus a battery pairing? Yeah. What would be the size of each of the systems? And as you said, probably the battery would be focused on fast response, whereas the gas turbines for the base load, right? Correct? What would be each sizing? Yeah,
generally speaking, and it differs from customer to customer, right? I would say kind of an M+1, M+2 arrangement. So, with the FT8 gas turbine, which is normally 30 megawatts, you'd have 3 that you'd be counting on online all the time, and potentially 1 or even 2 just sitting in backup. We have the ability with these gas turbines, as I mentioned, they are trailer mounted. So we can move them in and out quickly and swap them out quickly. So if you have an issue with a gas turbine, you can get another one to site fairly quickly, which provides a lot of resiliency around that point of view as well. And then batteries, you're probably looking at about 50 megawatts of battery installation as well to take out the buffer. So basically half of that general load that you would have a battery installation buffering out some of these transients that you were seeing so that the gas turbine arrangement sees a pretty stable load.
Yes. And in that sense, what duration of batteries are we seeing for these solutions?
Yeah, normally I would say 4-hour battery system has become a pretty standard solution. So you would figure a couple 100 megawatt hour system for that application.
And after selling the turbines, would you be also on the operating and maintenance side with the customers, or would they deal with operations?
And typically when we sell a gas turbine, it comes with a long-term service agreement. So that's typically how we go about the business. We have a kind of a 20-year agreement that sits on the back end of the sale, where we would basically be monitoring the gas turbine throughout its life, making sure it operates at very high reliabilities going forward, and have a service plan and parts plan to go with that long-term service agreement.
And now with this new solution available for developers, has this changed the approach of site selection for these data centers, for example? Because now they don't need to look for a place with good interconnection queue odds.
Yeah, it certainly has. In the early days, we would have many land developers coming to us and say they have an ideal site for a data center application. Yeah. And maybe that's true from a fiber point of view, but it didn't have any really gas interconnectivity. So typically when these folks would look for a site, they would look for a site that had maybe multiple connections from a interconnection point of view that provided high reliability.
Yes. And
then obviously fiber connections. So you're seeing Virginia and these spots. And now with AI and the LLMs, they really could be anywhere in the United States. So you're seeing like the geography of these spread out to more diverse locations, and really siting around gas has become a kind of a critical component of how they go about their business. So they're looking for electrical interconnection, fiber, of course, but now also looking at gas lines as well. So they can have either bring your own power, or they can work with the local utility and have some sort of cooperative agreement where they can, have
Yes.
almost a purpose-built large combined cycle on site. We've seen that with some of the work that we've done with Entergy in Louisiana. Meta's announced that a rather large installation, a couple of gigawatts of data center.
Yes.
So, that's basically, an ideal situation where they're working very closely with the utility. We have a local power plant that sits adjacent to the site, but yet it is ultimately grid connected, so backed up by the grid, which takes out some of the need for all that additional redundancy. Because as you can imagine, building all that redundancy into the system is rather costly, but it's a necessary evil in some cases to get power now.
You have mentioned that a lot of customers are going for you for the behind-the-meter solutions. Do these customers usually also develop at the same time that path to interconnection just in case for the future years, or are they planning to stay off the grid for the long term?
Yeah, that's kind of a mixed bag question as well, because we do see it across the board.
Yes.
Different answers depending on different customers you see. We have seen standalone power solutions where folks are looking to build and operate that facility behind the meter for the foreseeable future. But in general, I think most of them will be bridge solutions. So the way we see the market is kind of, you install your power plant, you get running for 3 to 5 years, you get your grid interconnection. The grid interconnection is then your most reliable source of power. And then you have a grid asset where you could actually curtail load, and peak shave and run kind of arbitrage with that asset that you have on site.
Quick break. If you listen to this show, then you probably work in energy. And at Modo Energy, we're not just talking about the energy transition. We help our users to actually make it happen. All energy storage, solar and wind assets on the global balance sheet need to be valued and benchmarked. And that's where Modo Energy comes in. Our benchmarks and forecasts are transparent, bankable, and trusted by the world's leading banks, asset managers, utilities, and developers. So if you want to learn more, go to modoenergy.com. And if you want more content like this, sign up to our weekly dispatch newsletter. Enjoy the conversation.
Now jumping onto front of the meter.
Okay.
A lot of people hear gas turbines and they think they are outdated.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the optimal solution right now. And with how the systems are evolving right now, how high renewable penetration, what is the real economic value that gas turbines are bringing to the grid right now? And why are they, again, very much needed?
Yeah.
In
I would say gas turbines, potentially with some folks historically, have gotten a bad rap. All right. It's fossil fuel derived. But if you look at the impact that gas turbines have on the industry over the last 20 years, we've been able to decarbonize about 50% in the grid in the United States. And a lot of that is from coal conversion to natural gas combined cycle. So these operate extremely high efficiencies. We're talking about close to 65% combined cycle efficiencies, extremely clean combustion of natural gas. So these are really clean, reliable assets that kind of are a bit underappreciated in the industry because they really have helped us decarbonize quite a bit over time. So going forward, we're excited about continuing to deploy. As we mentioned earlier, it's all about power now. So we're trying to deploy as fast as we can. But at Mitsubishi Power, we haven't given up on the vision for decarbonization. And so we're really continuing to push those technologies forward. So we've had obviously the big project in Delta, Utah, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but yes. Hydrogen capability, right, with the gas turbine itself. We have a production facility where we can do hydrogen production and take long duration storage of hydrogen and run that in the gas turbine. And more recently, we've had an announcement with the Broadwing project where we're partnered with a company called LCI, and Google's also a part of this, where we're actually going to be pairing the gas turbine up with carbon capture technology. So where we can actually capture the carbon post-combustion and store that in underground caverns.
Okay, right.
So that the technology continues to evolve forward. But I think one thing that's forgotten in the industry is how impactful gas turbines have been to allow us to decarbonize. And one other thing that I should mention is just the flexibility that gas turbines bring, right? So we have seen, as far as with the build out of solar and wind over the last decade, the gas turbine role has historically changed to be more of a backup. So these gas turbines can, extremely flexible. We've done a lot of work with flexibility. So we can really shape around a lot of that renewable growth that we see coming forward in the market.
So you mentioned hydrogen, used as one of the paths to reach the decarbonization goals of the company. We have read about IPP Renew, one of your projects, and the turbines that you're using there. Apparently, you can switch them from burning gas to burning hydrogen. Can you tell us a bit more about the project and how these turbines work, or what differences do they have compared to the classic turbines?
Sure. So we're very excited about the project. I particularly have been working on that project for close to 10 years now, working very closely with LADWP, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. As you may know, they're shutting down their coal-fired facility in Delta, Utah, and they wanted to replace it with a natural gas turbine technology. It provides quite a bit of electricity. They have a DC link that takes energy from Utah all the way into California. So they wanted to keep that link running because they do see a value in bringing a lot of renewable energy along that link. So that's where they looked at the idea of putting gas turbines, which are, as I mentioned earlier, quite flexible in the ability to basically keep that line operating. And so as they were looking at this, they were looking at means to help decarbonize that as well. So Mitsubishi Power has been doing a lot of R&D work on hydrogen for probably 20 years now. We've got different applications with different turbines using either blast furnace gas, where we have high hydrogen components in the gas turbine. So we're very comfortable with the idea of utilizing hydrogen in the gas turbine. As you're looking at the kind of the specifics on the gas turbine, you're really looking at combustion of the hydrogen. That has different characteristics than natural gas. So there's a higher flame temperature, faster combustion that need to be accounted for in the gas turbine. So really, as you're looking at kind of going from a natural gas turbine to a hydrogen turbine, you're really looking at the combustion dynamics within that gas turbine. So as we look to make a gas turbine hydrogen ready, we're really looking at two things. One is the combustor specifically. We want to make sure we can combust that hydrogen at a very low emissions level. So that's where a lot of the R&D money is focusing on right now. But also is to make sure that we can accommodate the higher diameter piping that's associated with carrying hydrogen, because we will require hydrogen larger. So when we say a project is hydrogen ready, that means the generator enclosures and the power plant layout is sized so they can accommodate the large bore piping when they do go to switch to a hydrogen environment. But the gas turbine specifically at the IPP Renewed project will be capable of 30% hydrogen when it commissions this year. So that's with conventional combustion technology. And we're looking to replace those combustors within the next few years to a new technology where we can combust 100% hydrogen. So really the power plant proper doesn't really see any difference between the hydrogen or natural gas combustion other than really the combustion of the hydrogen directly. So the combustor zone.
Could it be seen in simple terms as designing the turbine to resist the temperatures so that it can withstand gas as well?
And doing so in a way that your emissions are manageable, right? So you're really trying to drive down emissions while you do that process. Because we do have a lot of experience, as I mentioned, with combustion of hydrogen, where we would use like water injection to control some of the nitrous oxides. Here, you're looking at with the new technology that we're testing at our facility in Takasago, which is our R&D facility in Japan. We're actually utilizing no water injection, so it'll be a dry combustion. And we've done quite a bit of testing on one of our smaller gas turbines at that Takasago facility. We've already tested up to 100% combustion with that new combustion technology.
I see. Okay. What does this translate to in contract types and in CapEx numbers for developers when they buy these turbines compared to the classic ones?
Yeah. So it's really a nominal difference as far as the difference between a hydrogen-ready turbine or a purely natural gas turbine. Yes. There is some larger enclosures, right? But when you look at the grand scheme of things, it's very nominal on the overall EPC cost. So it's not dramatically different, if you're looking at a hydrogen turbine versus a conventional natural gas turbine.
Okay. And from a financing and lender's perspective, when they hear that a project has a hydrogen-ready turbine, does it change the financing of the project for the developers or not? Have you seen anything special in the market?
Yeah, I can't speak to too much of the financing part of it. I don't sit on kind of the development part of it, but as a kind of an equipment manufacturer, we have to make sure that we live up to the guarantees that we provide, right? So as I mentioned in the beginning of this podcast, we're very conservative as we look at product development. So we look at that reduces a lot of the insurance risk on the product because we've actually tested the unit. So that's really kind of our part of the project is really just making sure that we provide that certainty around technology and that we're going to live up to the guarantees that we're putting in front of the customer.
I see. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Same project, IPP Renewed. We have read that you can also have the capability of producing green hydrogen, store it in salt caverns, and later feed it to the hydrogen-ready turbine.
Right.
Can you tell a little bit more about that part of the project?
Yeah, so the genesis came from the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, and their kind of vision as they were looking at how this market is going to build out with all the renewable penetration in California. They really saw a need not only to store energy on a short-term basis with lithium-ion batteries, 4-hour basis, but also do more seasonal storage. They saw real value in having that ability. Mm-hmm. And that's really what the IPP project allows them to do, is to take massive amounts of renewable energy, store it in salt caverns, and then return it to the grid when they need it. So you can have more seasonal storage of hydrogen versus just a intraday storage of hydrogen. And I think going forward, they'll really see the value of that as the project comes online. And really, I think that's also going to build out a new industry in that area because of the ability to store hydrogen. I think you'll also see a lot more development in and around that area that will kind of take the benefits of that ability to store hydrogen for long periods of time.
And when we're talking about storage capacity, for how long are we talking? Are we talking about having fuel for months, for a summer, for a week, for how long?
You're certainly talking multiple weeks of storage, potentially up to months of storage with that facility.
Okay. So from the ownership perspective, who are the primary owners? I have read that you also have a loan for the project. How is that divided and who is carrying the risks exactly here?
Mitsubishi Power is a minority shareholder in the Advanced Clean Energy Storage Project, with Chevron being the primary shareholder. I'm not intimately involved in the negotiations around the actual project itself, so I can't speak to exact percentage of ownerships, but I can say that we are a minority shareholder in the project. And then the loan guarantee would be obviously shared equitably through the shareholders, right?
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that as well.
No problem.
Now, looking into the future, looking 5 to 10 years out, where do you think hydrogen-ready turbines and large-scale hydrogen storage will actually scale first? In the US, and which regions would you say?
Well, we did see a lot of activity in the Gulf states, right? When we were looking at the build out around hydrogen with the hub, the DOE hub program.
Yes.
Unfortunately, there's been a lot of challenges with hydrogen now. As we mentioned earlier, the story has changed dramatically, where it's all about the priority stack, I would say, has shifted from a lot of customers and utilities, where it's all about power now. So the good news is all the gas turbines we're installing today have hydrogen capability. We did a big test on one of our older gas turbines in Georgia last year, where we testing up to 50% hydrogen. So we were very confident that at least in the gas turbines we're installing today, that they can have 30% hydrogen, which is a massive amount of hydrogen. I mean, it would take a massive project to take one of these large gas turbines and provide it with 30% blend of hydrogen. So the good news is everything that we're installing today has hydrogen capability naturally built into it. I think I mentioned the Gulf states because of all the natural infrastructure in and around this region here. We're sitting in Houston today as we speak. So I think the Gulf states will probably kick off first in my mind, or as we look to build out hydrogen, and specifically in the domestic market.
Now, seeing that the turbines are ready for carrying hydrogen, is that also true for the gas pipeline system? Can they support what percentage of blend with hydrogen right now?
Yeah.
Or does the network need modifications?
Yeah, the network does need modifications. And as we were looking at developing through the hub program, we were looking at dedicated hydrogen pipelines to deliver hydrogen. So to take you from a renewable rich area where you can generate and then take that via dedicated pipeline, it would take a pretty significant infrastructure build out to take the current natural gas system and then start implementing hydrogen in that. There have been several studies done, but really I think what we'd see first is probably dedicated hydrogen pipeline build out sometime in the foreseeable future.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. On the demand side for your products, which types of customers are the first asking for these products? Can you give us a bit more color on who's asking?
Yeah, specifically to hydrogen or?
Yes, hydrogen-ready turbines.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like I said, the priority stack over the last 3 to 5 years has shifted pretty dramatically. So, as we were looking at the market 5 years ago, it was all about, decarbonization of the gas turbine, right? And how quickly can we deliver these to market? Today, the story is very much different, right? It's all about how quickly can you deliver any power to the market. So what we're hearing from our customers today is really just about deliverability and how quickly can you deliver and execute with excellence so they can get those electrons on the grid as quickly as possible. But once again, we still have a very long-term view of the market at Mitsubishi Power, and we do see decarbonization will become a part of that. So whether through hydrogen or carbon capture, we're very bullish on both of those technologies.
Great, thank you. Before jumping to the final part, is there anything that I missed that you would like to talk about that I should have asked?
No, I will mention that, one of the things that's exciting me about my role right now is really working across a lot of the different divisions through MHI. We just opened an office in Dallas, Texas called the Data Center Energy Management Team. And really they are looking at implementing and becoming a one-stop shop for data center customers. So they're looking at making investments in things like liquid cooling. They do data center maintenance right now. So the integration of that team with what we're doing on the power side is really kind of an exciting future for what Mitsubishi Power has to bring. So I'm really excited about how we develop that and kind of bring that out as a group of companies.
Great. Is there anything you would like to plug apart from that or promote, or say to our audience?
No, not at this point. I think, we can't be happier with where the market is today, right? But we do have a very big challenge ahead of us, is to really make sure we increase capacity, meet the market needs, do it so reliably and effectively where we're meeting our customer demands.
That's good. And the final question, as always, what is your contrarian view that you hold within the energy industry that maybe other people don't share with you?
Yeah, I will say, utility customers are some of our best customers, and they, historically have a reputation of not moving very fast, but we've experienced completely the opposite over the last couple of years. They've responded to this market like you wouldn't believe. And, we are very proud to be working with these utilities that are really delivering to the customers in a very, very time efficient manner. So.
Thank you, Peter. It was a pleasure to have you here.
Happy to be here. Yeah, thank you for the time.